Oh, back in my day I used to walk to school both ways in the snow when it was 40 degrees, carrying my local cathedral's organ on my back for band practice. But kids these days would rather be watching TikToks and Minecrafts in the back seat of an SUV. Oh, the absolute state of the world.
Don't you have a job to go to?
No, I bought about 100 houses in the inner west when it was a working class area. They were around $5 a property then, and I retired 20 years ago.
Could I have one?
No, they're all mine.
So what do you think was different about your time that meant that you were walking places or cycling places instead of being driven everywhere?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the TikToks and Minecrafts and...
Okay, we're not getting anything from him, but luckily I have a time machine. Okay, it's not quite a time machine, but it's the next best thing. It's a train ticket to Broken Hill. That's pretty cool.
It is cool, yeah.
New to the Yabba?
I was indeed new to the Yabba, and as a newcomer there was one thing in particular that really stood out to me. Just desert absolutely everywhere, just as far as the eye could see, just flat, red dirt. It was insane. But as far as things relevant to this video, kids were free to cycle around town. Welcome to Footpaths and Corner Stores. My real full name is Chris Topher, and make sure to subscribe for one free Minecraft and TikTok. Alright, before I get any further into this video, I want to take a moment to thank my monthly Ko-fi supporters, Arx Walia, Abram N, Building Beautifully, Lucas, and Stuart Vitch. The school that I did my professional experience at in Broken Hill had two massive bike sheds, and I'll tell you what, it was a lucky thing that I got to school earlier than the students, because otherwise there would not have been space for my bike. They were always over capacity. So that begs the question, why are kids cycling to school in Broken Hill in such high numbers, but not in Sydney? Well, I have a theory. Let me tell you about it. When my partner and I had COVID, we basically spent the whole time sitting on the couch watching an ABC show called Back in Time for the Corner Store, where a family experiences what it's like running a corner shop from the 1800s through to the 90s. Now, something that really stood out to me in that show is that when they reached the 90s, their store got a DVD rental vending machine. In 2010, when my dad was managing a corner store, he was considering getting one of those DVD vending machines. Now, to me, that seemed pretty futuristic, pretty cutting edge. But it turns out that Queanbeyan was 15 years behind the trend, and this was going on in Sydney in the 90s. The point of this story is that often the regions will be a bit further behind on national trends than the major cities like Sydney, and this phenomenon extends to biking. Now, I was part of the last generation in Queanbeyan who grew up biking around town as a way to get around. I'm not saying that my childhood was like Stranger Things or something. I only played D&D a handful of times when I was young, and my friends mostly didn't cycle around town, and we certainly didn't use it to go wherever we wanted. I would just ride to school on a pre-planned route that my parents and I had sorted out so that we knew it would be safe. And this trend away from cycling and walking to school, it's backed up by the numbers as well. In 1970, nearly all young people in Australia walked, cycled, or took public transport to school or university, 84%. Now, barely any do. So that begs the question, what has actually created this trend? What has driven the lowering numbers?
Well, I think it's that kids these days are just lazy. You can't check TikToks and Minecrafts while you're riding a bike, can you?
Come on, Gramps, I gave you a hint. It was in the question. Driven? Look, it's not the fact that kids are lazy. Primary school students consistently say they'd rather ride or walk to school. They say it's fun, they like travelling with their friends, and it makes them fit and healthy. Car travel, on the other hand, which is their least preferred way of getting to school, is considered boring. It means you have to sit still, you don't get any exercise, and cars make bad gas in the air. Ugh. What stops kids from cycling is mostly safety concerns about car traffic. This is because in car-oriented countries such as Australia, it is considered the responsibility of parents to keep their children safe from cars by keeping them in cars. The problem is, when kids go from walking and cycling to being driven by their parents, that puts more cars on the road, which means that less and less kids are feeling safe enough, or their parents feel it's safe enough for them to walk and cycle, which means they get driven, and so on into a never-ending feedback loop. This feedback loop doesn't just apply to school trips, it applies to all independent trips that kids would otherwise make. If it's not safe enough for kids to follow a pre-planned route to school, then it's sure as heck not going to be safe enough for them to spontaneously cycle over to a friend's house or meet at the park or something like that. So the feedback loop has to be broken by big intentional change. Now, there are two ways to do this. Number one, build a town for 35,000 people due to a mining boom, have that mining boom end, and then have the town inhabited by 17,000 people so that there's basically no car traffic because there's basically no people. Got kids cycling in Broken Hill, didn't it? That's not a good idea. Even outside of the economic condition of the town, it's not even a great solution to the problem we're talking about, which is childhood independence. See, the type of freedom afforded to children in Broken Hill, it isn't all good. Kids have lower rates of literacy, and although there isn't a whole lot of data about childhood mental health, 1/3 of the kids in Broken Hill are under high psychological distress, which is the same as the rest of Australia, so it hasn't exactly addressed that problem. As I kind of mentioned earlier, there's no car traffic in Broken Hill, not because the car traffic has been replaced with better kinds of traffic, but because there's just no traffic in general. We need foot traffic as well, and a really insightful look at the effects of foot traffic come from Jane Jacobs' book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities. Now, this was written in the 60s and it was written about the States, but it has a lot of lessons in it that are very applicable to contemporary Australia. This part of the book explains why high levels of foot traffic are just as important for childhood independence as low levels of car traffic. There was a documentary filmmaker named Guggenheim who noticed that at the end of the afternoon, roughly half the children of a daycare centre he was making a documentary about would leave that centre with the greatest reluctance. Guggenheim became sufficiently curious to investigate. Without exception, the children who left unwillingly came from a nearby housing project. And without exception again, those who left willingly came from the old slum streets nearby. The mystery Guggenheim found was simplicity itself. The children returning to the project with its generous playgrounds and lawns ran a gauntlet of bullies who made them turn out their pockets or submit to a beating, sometimes both. These small children could not get home each day without enduring an ordeal that they dreaded. The children going back to the old streets were safe from extortion. If anybody picked on them, there was always a storekeeper they could run to or somebody to come to their aid, says Guggenheim. So the most important change that Jane Jacobs observed when you move children from places with high foot traffic to places with low foot traffic is this. The children have moved from under the eyes of a high numerical ratio of adults into a place where the ratio of adults is low or even nil. I've actually got my own anecdote to back this up. The school that I went to for year 11 and 12 had a massive car park because it was a senior college in suburban Canberra. Is there any other type of Canberra? My English teacher, who was this fantastic bloke whose brilliance can be proven by the fact that the first time he tried a bottle flip he landed it easily, would often go into these speeches giving life advice. And they would always have a recurring theme of don't be the kids in the car park. The car park, of course, was where most of the chronic wagging or drug dealing or vandalism or whatever went on because it only got foot traffic twice a day. So now we have two axes on which to plot the way our public spaces impact the youth. One, freedom, which correlates negatively with car traffic. The other is supervision, which correlates positively with walkability. As proven by the Dutch having the happiest children in the world, high freedom and high supervision is the best way to go. This maps on well to what we know about education in general. Children learn the most in an environment of high expectations with high support. Now, expectations can be thought of as similar to freedom here because freedom comes with a high level of responsibility. Too much supervision with not enough freedom leads to kids being ferried constantly to and from pre-planned activities with no secrets from their helicopter parents. These kids tend to turn out a little bit anxious and maybe a bit unprepared for the real world. Too much freedom with not enough supervision results in behind-the-scenes bullying like in Jane Jacobs' stories, and kids growing up without the resources they need to become well-rounded and happy adults, like can happen in Broken Hill. Low supervision and low freedom results in kids who just stay home in their parents' basement all day, scrolling 4chan, watching iDubbbz and playing Call of Duty. It's with high freedom and high supervision that we can raise the next generation best, not just for them individually, but for society as a whole. So next time you consider giving feedback on a project that will impact our public space, before you think about traffic flow or parking or anything like that, just take a moment to ask the question that old mate Cat Stevens asked about 50 years ago.
Where do the children play?
Also, I'm curious, let me know in the comments down below where you would put your childhood on that graph and how that impacted you. And if you want to support an organisation that has set a goal for 75% of kids to walk, cycle, scoot or catch public transport to school, make sure to check out Better Streets. See you in the next video.